Hey guys, this is James Kay from Roseville Area High School, and I'm joined by Nick Palladian. Nick is an attorney for the Legal Rights Center in Minneapolis. Welcome back, Nick.
James, good to see you again.
Good to see you. So we are about ready to have a trial. The Judge Cahill wanted to start on March 29th, and it looks like we will be starting on March 29th. Picking a jury wasn't easy, was it?
No, it was belabored and painful. It took
Amen.
I think two and a half weeks, 3 weeks to get there. And we definitely saw some speed bumps along the way, right? We had some jurors, then we didn't. We had to go back and get rid of those and add new ones. So it was a lot of work. It was very draining. Even just watching it, my brain sort of started to turn to mush a few times because it's just so repetitive. You hear the same thing again and again and again. But yeah, being in the courtroom, being the attorney, their brains have to be functioning full speed for each individual juror. And I think they went through, 120 something. So it was a lot.
So it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the last couple of days there have been some seated jurors removed. At least one, is that correct?
Exactly. And I think it was actually two. Yeah.
Okay. Could you quickly explain for what reasons? Like what would necessitate they make the jury, but then they're removed after they made the jury? Why is that?
Yeah, and this was essentially primarily due to the announcement of the $27 million settlement with the George Floyd family. And we talked about, and folks have seen, it was a big deal, and you're in the middle of jury selection when that news breaks, which could potentially sway people one way or the other, whatever camp they're in. So what they did was they asked Judge Cahill to re-question the jurors who had already been seated. I think at the time there were 9 jurors who were already there. So like the attorneys felt, hey, we asked them the questions we needed to. We felt that they were, acceptable. But then that news dropped. So they said, hold on, we have to talk about that. That's kind of a big deal. So they brought back all of those jurors and questioned them. There were 2 that Judge Cahill felt, openly or close enough stated that, that the announcement of that settlement, that information would lead them to being biased, right? Okay. Saying that, hey, you know what? I know I'm supposed to presume him innocent. But, I think one juror said it really hit home, saying, hey, if clearly the city of Minneapolis felt that this person did something wrong, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have settled, and certainly not for that much money. So 2 folks who had previously indicated they could be fair and impartial, truthfully acknowledged that, hey, this is going to push me off into one direction a little bit. So the judge removed them for cause and said, thank you, we appreciate the honesty, but we just can't have you anymore.
Okay, which makes sense, especially at a huge trial like this, that everything's going to be under scrutiny, I'm assuming.
Very much so, absolutely. And one of those basic things, and there have been motions leading up to this all along, saying, Judge, we need a venue change, we need a continuance, we can't find, a fair and unbiased jury. So with that settlement announcement being dropped in the middle of it, that's just one more stone to potentially flip at that, for sure.
So let me ask a little more about that. So the defense asked for a venue change, meaning out of Hennepin County, and therefore they would have had to have a new jury.
Exactly.
And so their request for that was denied.
Yeah, exactly. So what Judge Cahill essentially said was, yes, this $27 million settlement announcement is, I think exactly what he said was, it was unfortunate. I'm sure he's probably internally using a little stronger language.
Probably.
But that was it, right? Saying, yeah, this isn't good. But the solution here is to re-question those jurors, right? There's no county we can go to. There's no place, definitely not Minnesota, that we can go to where folks haven't heard about this. Yeah. There is media everywhere. There is press. This is an international event. So it's not like we can just pop up to St. Louis County or Dakota County or anywhere else, Carver County, because they have the internet. They have television, they have newspapers. So wherever you go, you're going to have these same problems. And the solution is going to be questioning each juror thoroughly to see what they say.
Yeah, I was just today surfing the internet a little bit, and almost every major national news site has all the details of what happens each day, just like the Star Trib would, or a local news outlet or media outlet. It seems like all over the world they're staying up on top of this, and there'll even be more scrutiny starting on Monday. So,
Yep.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to agree. And it's, Judge Cahill has not sequestered the jury. So, to this point, they're not cooped up. He's telling them, hey, yes, you can access social media. I'll ask you not to read any articles that come up, but just like you said, it's pretty much impossible to open it up and not see something.
Right, for sure, for sure. So that brings up the question. So today's Tuesday, they have their jury. I still think it's silly that the jury could just go home and do whatever they wanted like it's normal. But so what happens now for the next 4 or 5 days? So the jury, what happens with them? Although you kind of explained, they just go ahead and live their lives. What does the prosecution, what does the defense do for the next few days? I know they're not driving to the Dells or Door County or anything for a couple days until Sunday night. So what do they do? What do these three parties do for the next whatever 5 days?
Yeah, so the jury, just like you said, they're going to go and live their life, right? And they're going to do their best, and we and the parties have to trust them, that they're not going to do research, they're not going to do homework, they're not going to talk about it with their friends and family. So they'll just live their life and go about their business, and probably sort out time off work, childcare, doctor's appointments, whatever,
Sure,
to work
makes
around,
sense.
these next 4 weeks. The parties are definitely not, just like you said, they're not going to the Dells.
Yeah.
They may not be in court, but they are certainly going to be spending every waking minute working and preparing. This is sort of the calm before the storm. You're going to have all of your witnesses being prepped. You're going to be going over your strategies. You're going to be going over your opening statements, preparing your exhibits, preparing your cross examinations, really just gearing up and using the next 5 days to really get your ducks in a row. Because once you're in trial, you're going to be in it, and at that point, folks are going to be prepared or they're not. So I think they're going to all walk in prepared. These are going to be a great 5 days for them to really spend time getting everything they need to in order.
Gotcha. So one of the things they're probably going to prepare for are opening statements, and opening statements start on Monday, the 29th, just like Judge Cahill wanted to. And so good for him. I mean, he knew that the jury selection was going to take a bit, and he's starting his trial on time. So what are opening arguments, and how long will those take? When they're done, do they end, or do they just go right into the trial after that? What happens, and what are opening statements?
Yeah, so opening statements it's sort of the kickoff of the meaty part of the trial, right? The trial proper. What we've seen so far is absolutely part of the trial process. Jury selection is obviously huge because it's a jury trial, and motions in limine are those sort of gamekeeping rules of saying, okay, before we start the fight, what can we do or not do, right? So we're going to get everything, smoothed out and ready to go.
Sure.
At this point, it's the starting gun is going to fire. And what you'll see is an opening statement differs from a closing argument.
Okay.
And by the very nature of an opening statement is going to be just that. It's a statement. And it's the main preview of where each party, each side, is going to first have the opportunity to essentially tell the jury, hey, folks, here's what you're going to see in this case. Here is what the evidence is going to show, right? The state is going to talk about all of the actions that Derek Chauvin took that day. They're going to talk about what is going to be shown in the video. They're going to talk about what the witnesses who saw it happening are going to say. They're going to talk about the actions and cries for help by George Floyd. And they're going to talk about the medical experts that they're going to hear from, as well as the police use of force experts. So they're basically running through, think of a movie trailer saying, here's what you're going to see, here's what you're going to hear. And at the end of this trial, we are going to stand right back up here and ask you to find Derek Chauvin guilty of all three crimes, all three charges, because that's what the evidence will show, right?
So in
Um,
opening statements, can you say whatever you want?
it's
I mean,
limited, right?
there's no objections. There's no objections, whatever fancy court terms. But I mean, can you
Objection,
say
yeah.
whatever you want, or is it still like, I object, and the judge can say, wipe that from your memory and move on, or how does that work?
Really good question. Yeah, there are definitely rules and boundaries about what you
Okay.
can say or what, for example, Judge Cahill ruled that only certain parts of the 2019 arrest can come in, or he ruled that Derek Chauvin's tax information that he's facing charges for tax fraud or tax evasion, that can't come in. So if the state were to get up there and say, you're going to hear that Derek Chauvin is a liar because he is also charged with tax evasions, you're going to get a massive objection from the defense and probably even a motion for a mistrial.
Which we would start
So
this whole process over. It's not, the trial isn't done. We just have to start all over.
exactly, and you can imagine everybody will be very upset if something like that were to happen. So yeah, there are definitely rules and boundaries that you can't cross, and you can't quite get argumentative, which it's a really fine line. It's not argumentative until it is, right? Because you are going to get up there and say, expert's going to testify that Derek Chauvin wasn't trained in this, or if he was trained in it, he was trained to stop earlier than you'll see that he did, right? So you are making arguments, but if you go too far, you'll draw an objection. The judge will correct you and tell you to kind of rein it in a little bit.
Yeah.
Then the defense and the state always goes first. They are the ones who are bringing the case. They have the burden, so it's up to the state to kind of get things moving. Then it's followed by the defense, and the defense will have the opportunity to stand up and say, folks, here's what you're actually going to see. Here's what the evidence is going to show. It's going to show that George Floyd, was resisting arrest, and he was on drugs, and he had a lethal amount of substances in him. Derek Chauvin did receive training that this is appropriate. He is a peace officer, and his use of force was appropriate. And the cause of death was not Derek Chauvin, but the cause of death was a combination of heart failure with those drugs in George Floyd's system. And at the end of this trial, I'll stand up here and I'll ask you to find Mr. Chauvin not guilty of all three charges, because the evidence will show that he's not, and the state will fail to meet their burden. Yeah. That's pretty much what you'll hear. After that, that is when the state sort of starts with their witnesses, and they start with the actual presentation of the evidence.
Okay. So then how long is there a limitation, number one, but how long will we expect each opening statement to last? Are we talking minutes, hours, days?
Yeah, I would say at most, depending on the case and the complexity of it and how much evidence there is, they're not always super long.
Okay.
But in a case like this, I think
super long? What's super long for an attorney who talks all the time is different than, well, not me, but somebody. Are we talking 10 minutes, 20 minutes?
I would say anywhere between 10 to 20 minutes could be like a reasonable amount for maybe a typical case, right?
Sure.
Because again, you're not making arguments. You're not necessarily going to be hammering home your point and saying, we're going to run through all of these things, and here's what it means, and here's what it doesn't mean. That's more for the closing spot. But in this case, I just think because there are so many experts, there is so much evidence, there are a number of charges. I think we could see the state go anywhere, an hour to potentially several hours.
Man.
And sometimes you are allowed to have exhibits or demonstratives up with you. So they might have an easel with pictures or a painting. They might play portions of the video.
In the opening statements, they do that as well?
They may, yeah. If it is evidence that is presumably going to come into trial and be shown at trial.
Okay.
If it's a piece of evidence, again, that can't come in or won't come in, then the judge won't or shouldn't permit that. But yeah, depending on how detailed and I guess creative they want to be, it could be a while. And same thing for the defense. They could get up there and sort of say, hey, we're going to run through line by line what you're going to see, and that could take a considerable amount of time too.
Sure.
So I certainly don't imagine they'll be short by any stretch.
Got you. So then is Monday reserved just for opening statements, or do they play it by ear? Does Cahill say, "Oh wow, it's 9:30 or it's 11:30, opening statements are done. Let's take a break and we'll jump right into the evidence," or the state's case, or do they just say, what, first day is reserved for opening statements. It's 9:05 or it's 2:30 p.m. We're going home and we'll be back tomorrow for the beginning of the evidence or the case, or I'm sorry, the trial, or how does that work?
Yeah, so judges in general like to be very judicious, go figure, with their time and mainly with the jury's time. So
Mhm.
they're going to want to squeeze typically, and I would imagine in this case, they're going to want to squeeze as much as they can into every minute of the day. So opening statements will start on Monday.
Yep.
Let's say, for example, they're a total of 3 hours long between both sides. What I would imagine they'll do is they'll take their lunch break, send the jury off, come back at 1:30 or 1 o'clock, and jump right into the first witness that they'll call.
Okay.
Typically, judges try to run it from like 9 to 9:30 up until 4:30, and they try to be very respectful of the jury's time. And I think
Time
you'll
meaning the amount of days. Let's get as much stuff in per day as we can, because we don't want to hold you for 3 weeks when we could do it in 2.
exactly, and
Got
and even on a day-to-day basis, right? Like we want you out of here at 4:30 because you have to go home to your kids, or you need to cook, or you have whatever else you have
Right.
to do.
I'm going to tell you right now, I anticipate that the jury will be sequestered very soon. I'm actually a little surprised that they get to go home today.
Yeah, I am too. I agree completely. It is like really, it's the biggest case I think in Minnesota history that I'm aware of, and I think this is on par with kind of an OJ or Rodney King level.
Oh, yeah.
And with the amount of publicity it's getting, it is shocking that it hasn't happened yet. And who knows, maybe on Monday when they officially swear the jury in, maybe it'll happen at that point.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I agree with you.
Okay. Nick, thank you as always. We appreciate your insight. We'll talk next week when after Monday. Why don't we try Monday night and we'll talk about what happened, and we'll just play it by ear.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks,
All
James.
right. Thanks, Nick. Bye.
Take care.